Imagine this. You're down to your absolute last dollar. Not a 10, not a 5, but a single crumpled dollar bill. It's the only thing standing between you and, well, you don't even want to think about what comes after this is gone. Maybe it's meant for a bus ticket to somewhere, anywhere, that feels like a fresh start. Maybe it's for a cheap meal, the first real food you've had in days. Your stomach aches with a hollow, persistent pain. Your feet hurt from walking. Your shoulders ache from carrying everything you own in a one backpack. The city feels vast and indifferent, a concrete jungle where you're just another invisible face in the crowd. You're standing at a bus stop, watching the world rush by, feeling utterly alone, utterly defeated. And then you see him. A boy, no older than 10, standing a little distance away, looking even more lost, even more vulnerable than you feel. His clothes are thin, his shoes have holes, and there's a look in his eyes. A look of quiet, desperate hunger that mirrors your own, but somehow feels even more profound, more heartbreaking. He's holding out a small, dirty hand, not begging loudly, but just offering it, a silent, hopeful plea to the uncaring street. And you look down at the single crumpled dollar in your own hand, your last dollar, the key to your next uncertain step. What do? Do you cling to the last shred of security you have? Or do you give away the very last thing you possess to a complete stranger? A child who seems to need it even more than you do. And if you do, what happens next? Does that single act of impossible generosity change anything? For him? For you? Or does the world just keep turning, leaving you exactly where you started, only now, with nothing left at all? Her name was Sarah, and that moment at the bus stop was etched into her memory, a photograph in her mind that time could never fade. It was a cold gray afternoon, the kind that leaches the color from everything, leaving the world in shades of dull urban decay. Sarah had been traveling for days, drifting from town to town, seeking work, seeking a break, seeking anything that felt like solid ground after her life had unexpectedly collapsed. A bad business deal, a string of bad luck, and suddenly the comfortable life she knew was gone, replaced by the harsh, unpredictable reality of being on her own with dwindling resources. She had arrived in this city with a few dollars to her name, a backpack filled with essentials, and a desperate hope that she could find a job, a room, a way to rebuild. But the jobs hadn't materialized. The cheap motels were still too expensive, and the hope was slowly, painfully draining away, leaving behind a bitter residue of fear and exhaustion. She hadn't eaten a proper meal in 2 days, surviving on stale bread and water from public fountains. Her stomach cramped, a constant, dull ache. She was standing at the bus stop, the wind whipping around her, carrying the smell of exhaust fumes and damp concrete. She had one destination in mind, a town a few hours away where a distant relative had once mentioned there might be work. The bus ticket cost exactly $1. She had checked her wallet a dozen times, the single bill feeling both insignificant and impossibly precious. Her last dollar. It represented her last chance, her last bit of control over her own fate. She clutched the dollar in her gloved hand, the paper soft and worn from being folded and unfolded so many times. Her thumb traced the familiar lines of the engraving. It felt like a lifeline, thin but vital. That's when she saw him, standing a little way down the street, near the corner of the block. A boy. He was small for his age, maybe 10 or 11, dressed in clothes that were too thin for the weather. A threadbare jacket, worn jeans, sneakers with holes in the toes. He wasn't running around, wasn't playing. He was just standing there, quietly, his eyes scanning the faces of the people passing by. There was something in his stillness, in the quiet intensity of his gaze, that caught Sarah's attention. He wasn't loud, wasn't aggressive. He just stood there, a small, solitary figure against the backdrop of the indifferent city. And then she saw his hand. He was holding it out, palm up, not actively calling out, but just presenting it to the world. A silent, vulnerable gesture. Sarah watched him for a moment, a familiar ache starting in her chest. She knew that look in his eyes, the look of hunger, the look of uncertainty, the look of a child trying to navigate a world that felt too big, too cold, too uncaring. It was a look she had seen reflected in her own eyes in shop windows sometimes. She looked down at the dollar in her hand. Her bus ticket. Her meal. Her last hope. Her mind raced. She needed this. She desperately needed this. Giving it away would be insane. It would leave her stranded, with literally nothing. But she looked back at the boy. He hadn't moved. He just stood there, his hand still outstretched, a small, fragile beacon of need in the urban sprawl. His face was thin, smudged with dirt, his hair uncombed. He looked cold. He looked hungry. He looked like he had nobody. A wave of something she hadn't felt in a long time washed over her. Not pity exactly, but a deep, resonant empathy. She knew what it felt like to be alone, to be hungry, to have nothing. She knew the crushing weight of desperation. And this was a child. The bus was due in 10 minutes. 10 minutes until her last chance to get out of this city, to potentially find a way back to stability. 10 minutes until that dollar fulfilled its purpose. She made a decision. It wasn't a rational decision. It wasn't a practical decision. It was a decision made in that strange liminal space, where empathy overrides logic, where a shared sense of vulnerability creates an unexpected connection. She walked towards him. As she approached, the boy's eyes, wide and hopeful, fixed on her. He didn't say anything. He just watched her, his small hand still extended. Sarah stopped in front of him. She looked at his face, at the quiet hunger in his eyes. She looked down at her own hand, at the crumpled dollar bill. She unfolded the dollar, smoothing it out gently. It felt strangely heavy now, weighted with the significance of the moment. She placed the dollar in the boy's outstretched hand. His fingers closed around it, his eyes widening slightly in surprise. He looked from the dollar to her face, a flicker of something unreadable in his gaze. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice thin but clear. "You're welcome," Sarah said, her voice a little hoarse. "Get something to eat." He nodded, clutching the dollar tightly. He didn't run off immediately. He just stood there for another moment looking at her, a small, almost imperceptible smile touching the corners of his lips. It was a fleeting expression, gone as quickly as it appeared, but it held a depth of gratitude that went beyond the simple exchange of money. Then he turned and walked away, disappearing quickly into the stream of pedestrians. Sarah watched him go until he was out of sight. The dollar was gone. Her bus ticket was gone. Her last hope of leaving the city immediately was gone. She was standing at the bus stop with absolutely nothing. A strange mix of feelings swirled inside her. Regret, sharp and immediate. Fear, cold and heavy. But also a faint, unexpected warmth. A sense of having done something right. Something human, in a world that felt increasingly inhuman. The bus arrived a few minutes later, its brakes hissing. People boarded, showing their fares. Sarah just stood there, watching it pull away, leaving her behind. She was alone again, but now, with the added weight of having given away her last resource. What would she do now? Where would she go? The questions loomed large and terrifying. She had made an impulsive, irrational choice. Had it been a mistake? Only time would tell. But in that moment, watching the bus disappear down the street, she felt a profound sense of uncertainty. a chilling awareness of her own vulnerability. She had given away her last dollar to a boy she would likely never see again. What would become of him? What would become of her? The future stretched out before her, vast, unknown, and suddenly terrifyingly empty. The next 20 years were a tapestry woven with threads of hardship, resilience, and the slow, arduous process of rebuilding a life from scratch. Giving away that dollar had been a turning point, though Sarah didn't fully realize it at the time. It had stripped her down to zero, forcing her to confront her situation with absolute clarity. There was no safety net, no fallback, only the present moment and the desperate need to survive. She didn't leave the city that day. With no money for the bus, she had no choice but to stay. She spent that night in a park, cold and hungry, the memory of the boy and the dollar a strange, persistent echo in her mind. The regret was a bitter taste, but beneath it, the faint warmth of that brief connection lingered. The following days were a blur of searching for work, for food, for a place to sleep that wasn't exposed to the elements. She took whatever she could find, temporary cleaning jobs, washing dishes in greasy spoons, helping out at a local soup kitchen in exchange for a meal. It was hard, back-breaking work, often for little pay, but it was work. It was survival. Slowly, painstakingly, she began to piece her life back together. She found a room in a shared house, a tiny space that was barely more than a bed and a dresser, but it was warm and dry. She saved every penny, learning to live on the absolute minimum. The memory of that day at the bus stop, of the boy and the dollar, remained with her. It was a reminder of how low she had been, but also, strangely, a source of strength. It was proof that even when she had nothing, she had still found a way to give. That act of selfless giving, however small, had chipped away at the bitterness and despair, leaving a tiny space for something else, a sense of her own humanity, her own capacity for kindness, even in the face of her own suffering. She often wondered about the boy. Had he bought food with the dollar? Had it helped him? Had he remembered the woman who gave him her last bit of money? She knew his face, the quiet hunger in his eyes, the small fleeting smile. But she didn't know his name, didn't know his story. He was just the boy at the bus stop. A brief, poignant encounter that had somehow become a permanent part of her internal landscape. Years passed. Zara found more stable work, first as a waitress, then in a small office. She moved to a slightly better apartment, started to build a small savings account. The scars of those early years remained. The memories of hunger and cold, the constant fear of being caught in the endless cycle of poverty. But with each small step forward, she gained confidence, a sense of agency. She was no longer just surviving. She was living, slowly, cautiously, building a new foundation for herself. She never forgot the feeling of giving away that dollar. It had been a moment of pure, unadulterated impulse. A decision made from the heart rather than the head. In a world that often felt transactional and cold, it was a reminder that there was still room for simple human connection, for unexpected acts of kindness. As her life became more stable, Sarah started volunteering at a local homeless shelter. She knew firsthand the struggles of the people who came through its doors. She listened to their stories, offered what help she could, always remembering the boy at the bus stop, the silent plea in his eyes. She never saw him there, of course. The city was large, and people moved on. But his image remained in her mind, a symbol of the vulnerability she had witnessed, the need that was all around her. She built a quiet life for herself. She didn't become wealthy, but she was comfortable. She had a small apartment filled with books, a few close friends, a sense of peace she hadn't thought possible during those dark early years. The memory of the mansion she had lost, the life that had vanished, still lingered, a faint ache. But it no longer defined her. She had rebuilt, not the same life, but a new one. One built on resilience, and the quiet strength she had discovered within herself. 20 years. 2 decades had passed since that rainy afternoon at the bus stop. The city had changed. Buildings had gone up and come down. People had moved in and out. Sarah had changed too. Her hair had a few more strands of gray. There were fine lines around her eyes, but her spirit was stronger, her gaze clearer. She had survived. She had rebuilt. She still lived in the same city, the one that had initially felt so indifferent and cruel. It had become her home, the place where she had faced her lowest point and slowly, painstakingly, climbed her way back up. She rarely thought about the boy at the bus stop in terms of seeing him again. It seemed impossible, a chance encounter in a vast city, 20 years in the past. He would be a man now, in his early 30s. What kind of man had he become? Had he overcome the circumstances of his childhood? Had that single dollar, that small act of kindness, made any difference in his life? She hoped it had. She truly hoped it had. But she had no way of knowing. It was an unanswered question, an open loop in the story of her life. The city was hosting a major charity gala, a high-profile event to raise money for local shelters and community programs. Sarah, as a longtime volunteer and supporter of the homeless shelter, had been invited. It was a world away from the bus stop, from the cold streets and the constant struggle. A world of glittering dresses, expensive suits, and polite conversation. She felt a little out of place, but she was there because she believed in the cause, because she knew, intimately, the importance of the work being done. She mingled awkwardly, making small talk, her eyes scanning the room filled with faces she didn't know. There were politicians, business leaders, socialites, people who lived in a different world, a world of comfort and security she had once known, and then lost. She was standing near a large window, looking out at the city lights twinkling below, when she saw him. He was across the room, talking to a group of people. He was tall, well-dressed in a sharp suit, his posture confident, his smile easy. He looked successful, at ease in this opulent setting. There was something familiar about him, something in the set of his jaw, the way he held his head, but she couldn't place him. He was just another face in the crowd, albeit a striking one. She turned back to the window, dismissing the fleeting sense of recognition. The room was warm, almost too warm, and the air felt thick with the murmur of conversation and the clinking of glasses. A few minutes later, she felt a gentle touch on her arm. She turned, expecting to see one of the event organizers. Instead, she found herself looking up into a pair of familiar eyes. He was standing right in front of her, the man from across the room. Up close, the familiarity was stronger, more insistent. There was something in his eyes, a depth, a quiet intensity that tugged at her memory. His smile was polite, expectant. "Excuse me," he said, his voice smooth, confident. "I couldn't help but notice you from across the room. You look incredibly familiar. Have we met before?" Sarah stared at him, a strange sensation washing over her. "Familiar? Yes, incredibly so. But from where?" His face was mature now, the lines of a man, not a boy. But the eyes were the same. I don't think so," Sarah stammered, feeling a sudden, unexpected nervousness. "I'm Sarah Jenkins." He extended a hand. "A pleasure to meet you, Sarah. I'm David Chen." She shook his hand, his grip firm and warm. David Chen. The name meant nothing to her, but the face, the eyes. He was still smiling, but there was a hint of something else in his expression now, a thoughtful, searching look. "David Chen," he repeated softly, as if testing the name. "And you're Sarah Jenkins." He paused, his gaze unwavering. "It was a long time ago, of course. 20 years to be exact. 20 years. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. 20 years. The bus stop. The rain. The dollar. Sarah's breath hitched. Her mind flashed back to that cold grey afternoon, to the small, vulnerable boy with the outstretched hand. Could it be? After all this time? In this place? 20 years, she whispered, her voice barely audible above the din of the gala. He nodded, his smile deepening, a warmth spreading across his face that transformed it, making the boy she remembered suddenly visible in the features of the man. 20 years ago, he said, his voice lower now, more intimate, on a rainy afternoon, near the old bus depot downtown. Sarah's eyes widened, her heart pounding in her chest. It was him. It was the boy, all grown up, standing here in this opulent room, a successful, confident man. You were the boy? She asked, the words feeling inadequate, almost absurd. He nodded again, his eyes shining with emotion. I was, he confirmed. And you were the woman who gave me her last dollar. The room, the gala, the other people, all faded away. There was only Sarah and David, standing in a bubble of shared memory, of a moment that had connected them across 2 decades and vastly different lives. Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes, unexpected and overwhelming. I can't believe it, she said, her voice thick with emotion. After all this time, I never forgot you, David said, his voice soft but clear. Not for a single day. He looked around the crowded room, then back at Sarah. This isn't really the place to talk, he said. Would you be willing to step outside for a few minutes? There's a terrace. Sarah nodded, unable to speak. She followed him through the throng of people, her mind still reeling. The boy. The dollar. 20 years. It felt impossible, like something out of a dream. They stepped out onto a wide terrace overlooking the city lights. The air was cool and crisp, a welcome contrast to the stuffiness of the ballroom. The sounds of the gala were muffled now, a distant hum. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of 20 years hanging between them. David turned to her, his expression open, vulnerable. That dollar, he began, his voice low. You probably don't know. You probably can't imagine what that meant to me that day. He paused, looking out at the city lights, his gaze distant, lost in memory. I had run away, he confessed. Things at home were bad, really bad. I was trying to get to my aunt's house in the next town, but I had no money. I hadn't eaten in over a day. I was scared, cold, and completely alone. Sarah listened, her heart aching for the boy he had been. I'd been trying to ask people for money, he continued, but everyone just ignored me or told me to get lost. I was starting to think. I didn't know what I was starting to think. I was losing hope. And then you came along. He turned back to her, his eyes filled with a deep, heartfelt gratitude. You looked like you were struggling too, he said. You looked tired and worn down, and you only had that $1. I saw you look at it. I saw the hesitation. And then you just... He shook his head slowly, a look of wonder on his face. It wasn't just the money, Sarah. It was the act. It was the fact that someone, a complete stranger, someone who clearly didn't have much herself, was willing to give away the very last thing she had to help me. It changed everything. He explained how he had used the dollar to buy a bus ticket, just enough to get him to his aunt's town. His aunt had taken him in, given him a home, a chance. He had worked hard, finished school, gone to college on a scholarship. He had started his own business, and it had been successful. He was now a partner in a major real estate firm, one of the sponsors of the very gala they were attending. I never forgot you, he repeated, his voice thick with emotion. I looked for you, you know, For years, I went back to that bus stop, hoping to see you. I asked around, but I could never find you. It was like you had just vanished. He smiled, a genuine warm smile that lit up his face. Seeing you tonight, it felt like a miracle, like fate. Sarah was weeping openly now, tears streaming down her face. Not tears of sadness, but of profound emotion, of awe, of the quiet, overwhelming realization of the ripple effect of a single act of kindness. You did all this, she managed to say, gesturing to him, to the gala inside, to the successful man he had become. From $1? From $1, and the hope it represented, David said, taking her hand gently. That dollar didn't just buy me a bus ticket, Sarah. It bought me a second chance. It showed me that there was still good in the world, that even when you're at your lowest point, someone might be willing to help. It gave me the strength to keep going, to not give up. He looked at her, his gaze filled with respect and gratitude. You saved me, Sarah. That day you saved me. Sarah shook her head, still crying. I was just trying to help a child, she whispered. I didn't have anything else to give. You gave the most important thing, David said. Hope. They stood there for a long time, talking, filling in the gaps of 20 years. Sarah told him about her struggles, about rebuilding her life, about volunteering at the shelter. David listened intently, his hand still holding hers. You know, David said, a thoughtful look on his face. The charity this gala is supporting, it's the same shelter you volunteer at. I chose to sponsor it because of you. Because I wanted to give back, to help others the way you helped me. Another wave of emotion washed over Sarah. The shelter she had dedicated her time to, the place where she tried to offer hope to others, was being supported by the very boy she had helped all those years ago. The circle was complete. I want to help you too, Sarah, David said, his voice firm. You helped me when you had nothing. Now I have something. Please, let me help you. Sarah hesitated. She wasn't used to accepting help. She had always been the one struggling, the one trying to give. Then there must be something, David insisted gently. A way I can show my gratitude. A way I can honor what you did for me. Sarah thought for a moment, looking at the kind, successful man standing before her, the boy from the bus stop. There was something he could do. Something that went beyond money, beyond material help. There is one thing, Sarah said, her voice soft. There is one thing, Sarah repeated, looking into David's eyes, that would mean more to me than anything else. David leaned in, listening intently. Anything, Sarah. Just name it. Keep doing what you're doing, she said, a small, genuine smile touching her lips. Keep helping others. Keep supporting the shelter. Use your success, your influence, to make a difference in the lives of people who are where you and I once were. That would be the greatest thank you you could ever give me. David was silent for a moment, absorbing her words. Then a slow, understanding smile spread across his face. Sarah, he said, his voice filled with admiration, you are an incredible woman. He squeezed her hand. I promise you, he said, his voice firm with conviction. I will. I'll dedicate a significant portion of my resources, my time, my energy, to helping others, to giving people the same chance you gave me. I'll make sure that dollar keeps multiplying, keeps creating hope. Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes again, but these were tears of pure joy, of profound fulfillment. She had given away her last dollar, her last tangible hope, and in return she had received something immeasurable, the knowledge that her small act of kindness had not only saved a life, but had also inspired a legacy of giving. They talked for a long time on the terrace, sharing stories, bridging the gap of 20 years. David told her more about his journey, the challenges he had faced, the moments when he had almost given up, but the memory of her kindness had spurred him on. Sarah shared her own struggles, the lessons she had learned, the strength she had found in the face of adversity. They discovered they had much in common, a shared understanding of hardship and the value of resilience. They weren't just two people who had met for a brief, pivotal moment 20 years ago. They were two souls connected by an act of grace, by the unexpected ripple effect of kindness in a seemingly indifferent world. As the gala wound down, David walked Sarah to the entrance. Can I see you again, Sarah?" he asked, a hopeful look in his eyes. "I feel like we have so much more to talk about, so much to share." Sarah smiled. "I would like that very much, David." They exchanged phone numbers, promising to meet for coffee, for dinner, to continue the conversation that had started with $1 and a moment of desperate need. As Sarah walked away from the opulent hotel, back into the cool night air of the city, she felt a profound sense of peace. The city no longer felt indifferent. It felt like a place of unexpected connections, of hidden miracles. She had gone to a gala expecting to feel out of place, a ghost from a different life, but she had found something far more valuable, a connection to a past she thought was lost forever, and a confirmation that even the smallest act of kindness could have a monumental impact. She thought about the boy, the scared, hungry child at the bus stop. And she thought about the man, the successful, grateful man who stood before her tonight, a living testament to the power of compassion. Her last dollar. It had been a sacrifice, a moment of fear and uncertainty. But it had also been an investment in a human life, an investment in hope, an investment in the belief that even in the darkest of times, light can be found, and kindness can create a ripple effect that spans decades and transforms lives. What would their relationship be like now? A friendship forged in a moment of desperation. A bond built on shared experience and mutual respect. The future stretched out before them, holding new possibilities, new connections. The open loop of the boy's fate had been closed, but a new one had opened. A story of two lives intertwined by a single act of grace. Sarah walked home, the city lights blurring slightly through the lingering moisture in her eyes. She wasn't the same woman who had stood at that bus stop 20 years ago, clutching her last dollar. She was stronger, wiser, and filled with a quiet, profound joy. She had given away her last dollar, and in return, she had received a priceless gift, the knowledge that her kindness had mattered, that it had changed a life, and that the ripple effect of that one small act would continue to spread, creating waves of hope and generosity in the world. And as she looked up at the night sky, she couldn't help but wonder how many other unseen threads of connection were woven through the fabric of the city, of the world, connecting strangers through simple acts of kindness, creating miracles in the most unexpected places. The thought was a comforting one, a reminder that even in the vastness and anonymity of urban life, humanity could still be found, and a single dollar, given from the heart, could be the starting point of something truly extraordinary. Sarah and David's story is a powerful reminder that kindness, even in its smallest forms, can have a ripple effect we may never fully comprehend. That single dollar, given in a moment of vulnerability and desperation, didn't just buy a bus ticket. It helped launch a life, create a legacy of giving, and bring two souls together again after 2 decades. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? About the moments in our own lives, the small acts of kindness we've given or received. How many of those moments, seemingly insignificant at the time, have set in motion a chain of events that have changed lives, perhaps even our own, in ways we never imagined? What if the person you offered a helping hand to, the stranger you smiled at, The cause you supported with your last bit of spare change? What if they were the beginning of a story that would unfold years later? A testament to the enduring power of human connection and the incredible, often unseen, impact of a single act of grace. The world can feel big and overwhelming, but sometimes all it takes is $1, one moment of kindness to create a miracle.